Good morning. Good morning. Welcome again to our meeting of the Monterey Bay Community Power. I'd like to make a couple comments, and we'll take a roll call and have an oath of office too. Well, maybe we should do that first. I'll make a welcome about this meeting. This is the second Policy and Operations Board meeting, a joint meeting, and thanks for everyone for your attendance. Is this not working?
We can't, we don't,
It's just got it.
it's recording. Oh, okay.
It's recording. Can you? Okay. You just need me to speak up more. Yeah. Okay. All right. And congratulations to the newly elected chair of the Operations Board, Renee Mendez. Before we get started with our meeting today, though, I'd like to provide some clarity regarding today's agenda. We have probably a long meeting that we might be going through, and the process we'll be using for this session. As you can see from the agenda, we have many detailed updates and reports, which are information and discussion process that we have to go through. The deal with startup activities that our staff and consultants are implementing, overseen by the Operations Board, we'll be discussing. Although there is no specific vote needed on these reports today, the information is significant for all of us to hear and learn as we move forward with the tremendous amount of startup work before the first of the year. There's also a few important action items. The consent items are to be considered for approval by both the Policy and Operations boards. The remaining action items for the Policy Board to approve as spelled out in our JPA agreement will be discussed. And even though the Policy Board members are the only ones voting on these action items, I want to encourage members of the Operations Board to fully participate in each discussion prior to the final vote. So we will get started now with the agenda items. The first is, was there anybody that didn't was sworn in officially with the oath of office last time? Okay, we have one. Anybody else? And maybe I will have you stand and then repeat after me. And then hand in this item to Carol Johnson at the end of the meeting.
You can just come and see me at the end of the meeting, and I'll have the forms that you can sign.
Okay, that's the only one that didn't? Okay, we have one other here. Well, you might as well stand and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I. So. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California. That I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. Welcome. Thank you. Now Laura Gaza, our recording secretary or clerk of the board at this point, will call the roll.
Supervisor, first line.
Here?
Sandy Brown, Councilman Sandy Brown.
Speak up.
Sorry.
That doesn't work. You have to speak up.
Councilman Kaufman Gomez. Councilman Termini. Here. Supervisor Parker. Here. Councilman McShane. Here. Councilman Affa. Councilman Smith.
Here.
Councilman Delgado.
Here.
Councilman Velasquez. Councilman Orozco.
Here.
Mendez,
Here.
Supervisor De La Cruz, Mr. Munzer, Councilman Friend. Is there anyone I'm missing from the policy board? Okay. Operations board, Mr. Palacios? Mr. Bernal? Mr. Montoya? Mr. Goldstein?
Here.
Mr. Baumann?
Nick Chulos for Lubana.
Mr. Corpus? Mr. McCarthy? Mr. Harvey? Ms. Long? Mr. Espinoza?
Here.
Did I miss anyone from the operations board?
Okay. All right. Now we have a period of oral communications for anyone who would like to speak to an item that is on an item or subject that is not on the agenda. Anybody would like to speak? Let's see, would you prefer they go, anybody? Okay, nobody. If anybody does want to speak from the audience, please go to the microphone over there.
We are students from the Millennium Charter High School. We are a arts and technology school, and we're here to present a mural we created in our earth science class. My name is Mia Alonso. I'm Christina Carey.
I'm Destiny McCloskey.
I'm Jared Anderson, and this is Captain Howard's science teacher.
Good.
So Millennium Charter High School is an arts and technology school. So along with our Common Core subjects, we also have classes on photography, film, and music. Along with other things, we also have like a green screen and recording studio. So we are very much able to exercise our creativity.
So, with this project, we learned about you guys with the Monterey Bay Community Power Plant, and about how we are trying to make a communal power plant that everyone in Monterey Bay can hopefully join together and come together as a community. And so we learned what you guys are trying to do. And personally, I like it a lot. And I think the whole our whole school will love to say that we enjoy what you guys are trying to do.
Okay, it is a 15-piece mural, 3 rows of 5, and it shows the progression of it's a representation of the Bay as a progression from the pre-industrial, industrial, and a possibility of a renewable future.
What we have here is a representation in a small form of our mural and what it would look like. We have multiple panels here that we each have, and we can hold up for you and show you what it would look like. We have the pre-industrial era, we have the industrial era, and we also have the renewable future. And so that's what the mural will look like in small form. And we hope that this will be a good representation for all ages to look at and visualize and see what the future could look like.
Very good. Thank you. I wish you would have been here 50 years ago, so you could just lead us out. That was really nicely done. I don't know if you have any other closing comments you'd like to make.
We chose Monterey Bay Community Power because we think it's a great organization
Thank you very much. We appreciate your efforts. Thank you very much.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Dan Nelson. I am the Director of Government Affairs for the Green Power Project of the Romero Institute, based in Santa Cruz. We are a climate action group. And I just want to give you a brief update about some exciting developments that we and several other nonprofit organizations in the region are undertaking at the moment. I have representatives here, Laura Solorio and Margaret Rebecki, from two of my fellow groups, San Benito Rising and Protect Monterey County. We don't have Robert Frischmuth here and Seth Caprone. They represent additional groups, Communities for Sustainable Monterey County, for example. But we have formed ourselves into a group. We want to continue to support this program in the way that we did in the run-up to the campaign. We knocked on hundreds of doors, made thousands of phone calls, and sent tens of thousands of emails in the run-up to the launch of this program to ensure that people throughout the region understood the value of MBCP. And so we want to continue that support. We want you to, if you would, think of us as highly motivated volunteer staff. We will continue doing research and public outreach on behalf of the program. We have a potluck this Saturday to celebrate the role of the grassroots in this program. We expect about 100 people to be there. It's going to be from 6 to 9 p.m. in Moss Landing at the Marine Labs. Of course, everybody here is invited to attend, but we will be giving away awards to grassroots leaders that we thought played an especially important role in this program. So we want to thank you for everything that you've done, and I've got some documentation here that explains the vision that we have going forward to support this work. The last thing I'll mention is that we have formed an alliance with a statewide citizens group called the California Alliance for Community Energy. Many of you may know that there's a statewide effort on the part of citizens groups like ours to advocate for community choice and to encourage community choice to be a robust tool for climate action. So we are linked in with that group. They've told us that once we formalize our effort, they will appoint us to the steering committee of that statewide effort. So we will have kind of statewide reach in terms of the scope of our work to draw on them for resources and advice, etc. So again, thank you very much. We're here to help, and we'll see you at the next JPA meeting for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank the Romero Institute for everything it's done in this whole process. It has been very active and very knowledgeable about the need for what we are doing here in the Tri-County region of Monterey, San Benito, and Santa Cruz County. Without your input, I don't think we would have had the energy to push it forward as strongly as we have. So I really want to thank you very much for your input. And I don't know if some of your colleagues would like to make a brief statement as well, but thank you very much to the Romero Institute. We appreciate it very much.
Without your support and trust, we wouldn't have been able to do it, so thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else who would like to address us in oral communications?
Good morning. Good morning, Chair McPherson and board. My name is Pete Scudder. This should be fairly quick, some ideas that might help the policymakers here today. I'm speaking on behalf of one of several different organizations today, one representing the California Solar Energy Institute Association, which is CalSEA, in which I'm a member. Also Monterey County Business Council, in which I'm the current chair, as well as a local business of Monterey County. On behalf of myself and these organizations, the message is similar and very clear. Although we are excited about the opportunity with the formation of this JPA, we also have some serious concerns on how the policies and agreements within the agency will be constructed. We believe the JPA is to be successful in providing clean, renewable, affordable energy to our local citizens and family. That the business model needs to be structured in favor of supporting local businesses, local industry, and local workers. The goal should be that the majority of the JPA energy comes from clean, renewable sources within the county in which the JPA serves. A head start on this local first policy, if you will, would be adopting a model very similar to the Sonoma Clean Power, which was adopted when they set up their JPA. However, with a slight modification, Sonoma's attempt to encourage local private developers to build projects for the JPA fell short because it capped the size limits to 1 megawatt. And due to this restriction, only 3 of these systems have been built for the Sonoma Clean Power. But there is good news in this. Using the same model, increasing the small system size up to a 5 megawatt system and a medium size up to 10 megawatt system, this would allow private power providers the opportunity to build an affordable system and deliver the power under a common power purchase agreement called a PPA, which favorably allows the JPA, this JPA, to be a power broker and not a power developer. We believe the PPA agreements with private power providers would not only provide for a quick, clean energy resource for the JPA, it would also send a powerful and positive message to the community that this JPA is here to support our local economy and local jobs, and in turn would create more JPA local clean energy consumers. I have copies of the Sonoma agreement. I made a little modification. I penciled in so you can see what I mean by that with the Sonoma and how easy it would be to adopt that into your particular policies. And I also have copies of letters from Monterey County Business Council and the CalCIA. So thank you very much. And I'll leave that with you, Bruce.
Yeah, that'd be fine. That'd be fine. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.
Mr. Scudder.
Good morning, my name is Karen Locke, and I'm here for Robert Fishmuth for Communities for Sustainable Monterey County. And I just wanted to let you all know how very, very supportive Communities for Sustainable Monterey County is towards this program and project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Saint from Aptos, and an advocate with Citizens Climate Lobby as well as Sensible Transportation. And Citizens Climate Lobby has really supported you in the past, and I just wanted to bring up some ideas about thinking a little bit outside the box with our build out of this project. One that I've researched a little bit is in Germany, and it's called the Energy Sharing Platform, which maybe you guys have already heard about. And what that does, it shares surplus energy from a community with connected communities. Instead of having these big, well, you have to have the wind farms, but the big solar farms and stuff, they're basically not doing that. They're using actual infrastructure that has already been built. And I think that would be something that would save a lot of money and could go to actually reducing our kilowatt costs. They also allow the grid operators the opportunity to balance the grid or stabilize the grid. In return for this, their customers will get money, which guarantees free electricity for the customers that allowed them to use that property. This does seem like a threat to traditional utility companies, but I think it's time that we change that scenario and get down to much smaller local energy production. So basically, you don't have to undertake all or even most of the project yourself. Making local energy development a priority. Projects that do this, residential rooftop solar, shared community solar, production of brownfields. Brownfields is something that Contra Costa County is going to do. They have properties that have been abandoned, and so they're looking at that to put their infrastructure on top of. And one of the examples is the Naval Air Base in the Alameda area. So whatever we would have in these counties, I haven't researched, but I would imagine there are some areas that we could use. Roofs of larger buildings, and also public properties. And just so I don't plagiarize myself, I've got this other one from the Sierra Club, the San Francisco chapter. This came out in March of 17. Basically, it's just a statement that they sent to Contra Costa County, and I'd like to read it to you because I think this also applies. We must make clean energy development the center of our CCE strategy, but we must also insist upon a plan that provides maximum accountability to all counties. Our representatives must have the opportunity for a close oversight of CC operations, and our residents must have an opportunity for representation, not only by board members, but also through Representative Community Advisory Committee. County supervisors and city council decision makers must choose a CCO program fully dedicated to community oversight, local energy generation, and much needed job creation. Let's not settle for something that is expedient. The right CCE can provide a unique opportunity for robust and sustainable economic development, one that we should not squander. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to address us on items that are not on the agenda? Okay. We will then move to item number 4, approval of the minutes of May 3rd, 2017, the joint board meeting that was held here. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Motion, second. All those in favor? It's been moved and seconded. Aye. Any opposed? And what I'm going to do is as we go through the operations, if we have opposition, I'll just ask those who are opposed just to raise their hands so the secretary can identify those, but that's a unanimous vote. Okay, now we will move to item number 5, an update from the Operations Board, and I did mention that Renee Mendez of Gonzales was approved as Operations Board Chairman, and Ray Corpus of Salinas was approved as a Vice Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Before we move on, I don't know if the Operation Board, we took action on the minutes, approval of the minutes, so maybe I can ask from a motion from the Operation Board approving the minutes?
We don't have to do that today.
You'll do it at the next operation.
Oh, okay, because so we don't have a joint meeting today then?
That's correct. You just do it at your own board meeting.
Okay. I missed that. Okay, sorry. So, yeah, I wonder if staff can give us a quick summary of the Operation Board meeting?
I'm sorry.
Can you give a quick summary of our Operations Board meeting, please?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
So that meeting was held on June 7th here at the Marina Library. And as stated previously, Mr. Mendez was approved as the Operations Board Chair, Mr. Corpus as the Vice Chair, and Laurel Gaza as the Clerk. The Administrative Services Agreement with the County of Santa Cruz was also approved. This will allow the county to continue to provide services, including clerking of these meetings, preparation of these meetings, possible preparation of requests for proposals when the time comes for those to be issued. And so we will continue to provide those services until staff is hired by Monterey Bay Clean Power. And the other item that occurred then was that the Operations Board meeting schedule was approved. It was amended. We were going to continue meeting here, but the next meeting, which is scheduled for August 2nd, will be at the Watsonville City Council Chambers at 9 o'clock, which is 275 thank you, Main Street, 4th floor. Sure.
I don't know if any other member of the Operations Board would like to say anything. If not, that's our report. Thank you.
We'll now move to item number 6, the selection of a chair and vice chair of the policy board. We have one application for each of those so far. Yours truly for chair and Steve McShane of Salinas as vice chair. Are there any other nominations that people would like to show an interest in or nominate a person to be chair or vice chair? Seeing none, I'll wait for a motion. I think we can do this both at the same time. You want to make a motion? Moved by Trina Kaufman-Gomez, Ray Friend second, for chair, vice chair of Bruce McPherson and Steve McShane. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? You can come to the next meeting. All right. Okay, now we have appointment of a secretary, and Carol Johnson will make a report on that.
So in addition to the chair and the vice chair, we also need a secretary to take the minutes and report out on those minutes. For the policy board, we are recommending that Laurel Gaza, who's the current secretary for the operations board, take on that role for the policy board.
Welcome. So it's a temporary. Move and seconded by Termini and Delgado second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So ordered. We also need to discussion possible of appointment of a treasurer. We have not had any submission of anybody who is interested in that. I do know there is at least one person, Trina Kaufman-Gomez, is that correct? For Watsonville. Is there anyone else who would be interested as an interim treasurer to be interim treasurer? Anybody else have an interest or want to make a nomination?
Please, let's competition here.
Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to appoint her.
Moved by Supervisor Friend, second by McShane. All those in favor? So ordered. Trina Kaufman-Gomez, you have all the monies in your hands. Okay. Okay, we will now move to item number 7, the administrative organization. The banking and credit services will be Peter Detlef of the Santa Cruz County Economic Development Department. Oh, Sean,
Yep,
excuse me.
I can be Peter today.
Okay.
It's all good. Good morning, everybody. I am just reporting out on the current activity with respect to the negotiations with River City Bank and getting our credit line in place and all of the activities related to the credit guarantee. So I think the first thing to say from our last meeting is thank you very much, because there has been significant activity and progress toward getting everything signed, sealed, and delivered as we have final loan approval by this body coming up here in the next month or so. So what I will do here is, I believe you all, I'm going to assume that you've read the staff report. I do want to just make a couple of comments on, as things have progressed since we released this. On page 2, I just want to say that the credit allocation and the credit guarantee allocation that you see here on this chart, the percentages for each county remain the same. The difference being that now San Benito County has decided to go ahead and take care of their full credit guarantee obligation. Of Santa Cruz County or Monterey County to pick up that extra 8%. So that's been a positive development. I want to acknowledge the folks in San Benito County for working hard to make that happen. Their Board of Supervisors recently approved an allocation for that agreement. So just a couple of other quick highlights here. The bank did, the bank loan committee did approve your loan on June 16th, so that is great news. The bank submitted loan documentation, or the loan agreement, a couple of weeks ago, and that is has been reviewed, and we will be having a ad hoc subcommittee conference call on Friday to literally do a page turn on that loan agreement, with the idea that we are submitting consolidated comments to River City Bank on Monday of next week. That's the goal, so that they can do a quick turnaround to incorporate any changes that they can, so that there would be a final loan agreement coming back to the group sometime by mid-Wednesday or Thursday of next week is the target there. So all of that is happening. Last thing I'll say is that we received an opinion from General Counsel as well as Bond Counsel that the Policy Committee must approve the loan at a regularly scheduled meeting, so it can't be a special meeting. And we'll be talking about this a little later in the agenda, but the bottom line is that September 13th, which if you ratify the schedule, will be the next Policy Board meeting, and that is really our drop dead to get that loan agreement approved by this body, which means, backing up into that, all of the Board of Supervisors council meetings that need to occur between now and then to get approval for these agreements needs to happen before then. So if you're going dark in August, as we know many of you do, please try and get this done and on your docket and approved by the end of this month, if you can. So with that, Peter, did I miss anything? Are there any other updates? Okay, I just want to appreciate the movement.
I thought
Yes.
it was going to be August, we might be acting on it, because we meet in August, but it's September meeting that will be make this policy.
Yes, so
So they actually, some people are dark this month and some are August, I guess. So just so we have it by September.
yes, so the policy committee will have perhaps a special meeting, and that's to deal with the implementation plan, but the attorneys have opined we can't approve the loan at that meeting. It has to be a regularly scheduled meeting. The next one right now is proposed as September 13th.
Clear?
Okay?
Question, within that same staff report under the Monterey County cities, they're scheduled to have the agreements go to the Board of Supervisors on July 25th. So are we anticipating anything that comes out of that causes a delay on the the September deadline? Is there anything that the cities need to be doing?
I can speak to that. Monterey, the Board of Supervisors will have before it on July 25th the agreement, the overall funding agreement, credit agreement, it's been revised or is being revised to reflect the recent San Benito County development. It will be conditioned on the cities completing their part of it, the repayment provisions where the county, or Monterey County's credit guarantee for the cities. That information has been sent out to all of the cities. We've asked that it be agendized, and we are hearing that at the moment the cities are all taking action on that. We believe August 15th, I think, Salinas will be considering that. And we believe, based on the information we've gotten back so far, that would be the last city to act. So we would ask that the city of Monterey agendize that at that date or sooner. But your staff has a copy of that agreement.
And in the staff report, it says, the staff continues to discuss, so I suppose the county has resolved the concerns they had about reimbursement, because that's what's in the staff report.
Yes, we've got a draft agreement that's gone out to your staff, as I said, as far as the city's reimbursing Monterey County if need be for that portion of the credit guarantee. The other concern with the San Benito County portion of what you're reading in the staff report has been resolved, and Mr. Espinosa can probably speak to that more. Yeah, you're welcome.
I do have a question, Ray. When is that going to go towards the San Benito County Board?
Speak up.
This San Benito County Board.
Yeah, we have tentatively planned for the 18th. Again, this is just new information that we received this last week on actually taking the notice on.
18th of July.
July.
Because you know the city is dark until the 1st of August.
For the county, that's correct. So I've been working with your staff on meeting to get together with them. So
That's what I wanted to say was the schedule. The first meeting in August would be the first time the city of Hollister would have a chance to approve that. So I know
Yeah.
That's
all
great.
the information will be there, and it's just it won't take that long to get that done, but it won't be done until the first meeting in August.
Great to know. Thank you.
Okay.
So it seems like, again, just an acknowledgement that things have been moving down the track well, and a lot of collaborative work is being done. The consolidated comments will hopefully go as smoothly on Friday, and then revisions will come back before the subcommittee, and will continue on with the idea that on September 3rd, the full package is adopted by the policy board as per the requirement of the JPA agreement.
Any other questions on that aspect? Okay, then the vendor contract update. Carol?
So on June 27th, the County of Santa Cruz Board of Supervisors approved 3 contracts.
Push the button.
Thanks. So on June 27th, the County of Santa Cruz Board of Supervisors approved 3 contracts. The first one with Miller Maxfield in the amount of $199,998. That will continue moving the marketing, outreach, public service announcements, and media advertising that will need to happen as Monterey Bay Community Power continues to move forward towards its spring 2018 launch date. We also have a contract with Lean Energy for $75,000 for their continued administrative and organizational support. And the last agreement is with Pacific Energy Advisors for $265,000. We will use their services to implement the implementation plan, work with developing power agreements, and Mr. Kirby is here today from Pacific Energy Advisors to report at a later staff report item. The goal is that once financing is in place for Monterey Bay Community Power, that these agreements will transition over to them, and the County of Santa Cruz will be reimbursed for any costs out of pocket once the revenues start flowing and the River City Bank revolving line of credit is paid off.
Any questions? Yes. Supervisor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so I noticed that on a couple of these contracts and the budget, it was clear that there would be kind of it would be based on reimbursement and so on. But for Miller Maxfield, there was no specification about how some of these costs were going to, what the process was going to be for some of this work to be done and approved and paid for and so on. And in looking at the budget, I thought I had some questions about it. So I guess I'm just wondering, how is the scope of work and budget going to be managed for the communications and outreach?
Bill, do you want to speak to that?
Get a mic there, yeah. Bill Maxfield?
Yes, thank you for that question. So we have a working group that has been executing on the communications that have happened to date, and Carol Johnson and Sean Marshall and David Carlson, among others, have been part of that working team. What we have, the full implementation plan includes a larger budget. The amount that was approved by the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors was the amount deemed necessary to take us from July 1st through December 31st. And I'll be able to speak more to that in a later item. But in terms of the management of that contract, it's coming through the County of Santa Cruz with collaboration among all of the participants from the jurisdictions.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that, and there may be an opportunity to speak to that in a little bit more detail when you make the fuller presentation, but I will just say there were a couple of things here where I was like, $12,000 to do 3 earned media? I mean, so I would need to understand what the costs are, and I know this is not my business area, so, and $30,000 for a website using an existing website, I'm just wondering, what are all the costs that are involved? Or sending out an e-blast, how many people are you sending to that it's going to cost whatever it was? I don't remember. Some kind of sounded like a high amount of money. So, and I know there are costs involved. So I just I don't need to know and understand it in depth. But as long as somebody's looking into this and that you're clear that these are that these are true costs. But I was a little stunned by some of the amounts. So maybe you'll get into that when you speak to it later.
And I can answer a couple of those right now.
Do you want to do it right now?
Just a couple of them.
Okay.
I think that with regard to some of these numbers, they were developed as mere placeholders, because you'll see that in the later item, the first item that needs to happen is an actual executable plan. So there isn't yet a plan that would have those budgeted amounts in there. So those are purely placeholder. And also on the website, it's not a renovation of an existing website. It's a complete bottom floor new. It'll have the same URL, but it'll be a completely new website. The one that's there now was created in somewhat of a heroic way by volunteers, and we have sort of kept it alive in its current status to get it to now. So, and I can talk to more of that in a later item.
In more detail. Thank you. Good point. Any other questions on that?
I just might want to add too that these vendors will be working with our interim CEO. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Thank you for saying that, because I looked at this timeline and I thought, this is all mapped out. What's our CEO going to be doing? So, and I think most likely he will want to be working very closely and adjusting some of the thoughts that we're trying to project out there.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions on that item? Now, Carol, you wanted to talk about the Form 700, that the coveted Statement of Economic Interest that we all love. And
So upon further investigation, I found out that this form needs to be filed with the Fair Political Practices Commission. They are currently reviewing our conflict of interest. So once that has been approved, I will let everybody know. In the meantime, the Form 700 needs to be filed handwritten, not electronically. So that form was included in your packet. And because the Fair Practices Commission is moving this month, I'll ask that you turn in those forms to me, and then depending, I'll send them in mass up to them to whatever address is appropriate at that time.
how can they get these to? Can we just mail them to you?
You can just mail them to me,
What
yes.
would that be?
701 Ocean Street, room
701
330. Room 330?
Room 330?
Right.
Okay, and that's 95060. Do you need, anybody need that room 330, County Government Center, Santa Cruz?
Can you start from scratch on the address?
Sure. County of Santa Cruz, General Services Department, room 330, 701 Ocean Street, Santa Cruz, 95060. The address is also shown in the agenda item staff report for reference.
Any other questions? Okay. We will move on to item number 8, the approval of the implementation budget.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That is item number 8. It's the implementation budget. You should have in your agenda that the implementation budget of $2.293 million needs to be approved by the policy board as part of the loan package. I would assume that each of you have read that and have looked at it. Just open it for discussion, or did you?
Sure. I don't know that there, thank you. There's not much more to say on this, other than to say that what's important to know about this is that it didn't change from the May 3rd draft that was presented before the joint policy board at that time. And it is required to be approved and adopted by the policy board as part of the loan package. In terms of going forward, what will happen with this implementation budget is that it will then it'll morph, if you will, or be enshrined in the longer-term operations budget for the agency that will be developed by the interim CEO and should be available for ratification by the policy board, we hope in September, but depending on the timing, that may bump out to December because it needs to go to the operations board as well, just for some internal vetting. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions. There are a number of notes in the staff report about what this implementation budget does and does not cover, because it doesn't include things like the county internal soft cost county expenses. It doesn't include power procurement and some of the other bigger ticket items that are going to show up later in that more detailed operation budgets for the agency.
Vice Chair McShane, did you have a
Sure, just real quick, so the interim or potential interim CEO has looked at this?
Yes, informally he has when it was posted, and he is fine moving this forward.
Mr. Delgado from Marina?
Yes. As usual, organizations have a high staff cost, and this one is the biggest line item. It's $650K, and it includes, it looks like about $330,000 for the executive director. And my questions are related to what's coming up on staff item 9 on that employment agreement for the interim executive officer. So I don't know if I should ask them then, because that money is included in this, or should I ask them now?
I think it'd be fine to ask him now.
Okay, so my only question is, I'm ignorant of what's gone on, so I just want to know, is it appropriate, is it necessary that we're spending $336,000 in a compensation package for this person, and that it includes a signing bonus of $30K? So those are the two things that jumped out at me, the total and then the subtotal of a signing bonus of $30K.
Well, it's, the details of that contract is the next item. I think it would be, what we should do is approve the implementation budget, but, excuse me.
So I'll take it back to that. It is the going rate for somebody with the skill set that you're looking for. There's probably 3 people in the state of California who can perform this job. It's equivalent to what he's making in his current position in Santa Clara County. The signing bonus is just a clever term. He's not allowed to perform work for anybody else other than his current employer, but he wants to get started working for you. And so he's going to be doing that uncompensated. The $30,000 then is what makes him whole until this contract kicks in September.
Okay, thank you.
Any comments from the public on this item? All right, seeing none, we need to, I'd like to have a motion for approval of the implementation budget.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Termini, seconded by McShane. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So ordered unanimously. We'll now move to item number 9, the approval of the CEO contract and approval of hiring of interim chief executive officer. Would that be? Okay.
So Ajita Patel, who's been reporting to your boards about this item, is traveling in New York City. I hope she's having a great time. She asked me to cover this item. I think the two most important things we just talked about, the amount of the contract and the signing bonus. As your boards are aware, there was a sort of a multi-layer process for your boards to find Tom Habashi. The contract that's in your packet is within the parameters that you set for your negotiating team. The only difference is that we started out with an independent contractor agreement, and we couldn't get there with Tom, and this is an employment agreement that's fashioned after the agreement he currently has in Santa Clara County. Everything else is the same. It's unbenefited, and he's excited about providing this for your boards.
Any questions on the contract itself? Councilmember Trina Coffin-Gomez.
The two forms of agreement. The independent contractor agreement is what we, the County of Santa Cruz, uses for non-employees. He did not want to be indemnifying the boards, which is completely understandable. He would have had to have taken out a fairly large insurance policy in order to do that, which he didn't want to do because he's not providing his own office space, for example. So if somebody came in and had a trip and fall, he's indemnifying your boards, and he wasn't comfortable, and I think that's very understandable. So we moved it into the form of the agreement that he had over the hill, and we modeled it after that agreement.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Smith. Oh, Councilman Smith from Monterey.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on some of the questions that Bruce was starting on the last item. So I just need to hear more on the compensation piece. I understand that he's going to be in a status of retired from the other employer. This salary has been reported that it's similar to the Santa Clara salary, and that there are about 3 people that in the state of California do this kind of work. So I understand it's unique. But he's not working for Santa Clara, and those salaries are considerably different than San Benito, Monterey, and Santa Cruz salaries. When you look at other employment categories, Santa Clara is extremely a different, unique salary basis when you compare it. So I just need to hear a little bit more from the subcommittee in terms of the negotiations of where that baseline was and how we justify getting to $27,500 a month, because that is a salary that is considerably off the charts compared to the 3 counties that this JPA has.
City Manager Goldstein from Capitola.
Sure. So I was on the negotiating team, and we were trying to work within the parameters that the policy board established during the interview process. You'll recall Mr. Habashi was the unanimous recommendation from both the nominating committee within the operations board and then the operations board itself. I think I'm getting some feedback. The ultimate contract was a little bit of a kind of a creative twist on trying to work within the parameters that the policy board had established and working within the constraints that Mr. Habashi is operating under his current contract. He'd indicated an interest in getting going. We want him to get going right away and working in his free time, working on weekends. So the signing bonus was one technique that we used to basically compensate him for the time that he was going to be working over the next several months to help us move forward the things that we need to move forward to meet our deadlines. And then the 10-month piece of the contract that picks up 60 days from now. So we were trying to operate within those parameters. I understand that the compensation is high. Believe me, as city managers, we know what compensation looks like, and we do recruit and hire all kinds of employees around this region. That said, it's not a local job market. This is a statewide job market. These jobs are not, there's no other job like this in the Tri-County region. We are going to be drawing someone from a statewide market, and so therefore that is what the market looks like.
Okay, so I appreciate the comments. My head tells me the span of control for the individual and the size of the agency and looking at the responsibilities. We know that a new organization is not going to start off with a lot of employees that he's supervising. It's more programmatical. It's network. We're hiring his vast amount of years of experience to help us, and I think he sounds like he's very qualified. I'm just still struggling with the compensation amount, so I need to hear more about the 27.5, where that fits in with, as yourself, a city manager and your span of control. I mean, this amount is all-inclusive, so we as an agency are not paying for anything else. So there's no workers' comp, there's no insurance, there's no federal or state contribution, so that backs it down a bit, so that helps. But for somebody who is supervising 8 or 10 people, I'm just having a hard time with justifying this amount. Don't want to lose the candidate, think he's outstanding, but I need to hear more details about why that compensation is so large. A police chief that would have 250 would make about $16,000 a month. This person has very little risk, does not supervise more than 8 or 10 people, is running a startup organization, so should be compensated for his expertise, but just need more to get me to that salary.
We had that discussion the last meeting about, the parameters and the size, and everybody did gulp, I think, a little. But the reality check was that this is what people of this caliber are paid in the state of California. I don't know if anybody else.
Yeah, Chairman McPherson, if I may add, this is a very unique position. You're going to find not even a handful in the state of California. He is starting up an organization. He has the only experience in the state of California starting up these type of organizations, and this will be the second one for him. We wanted to hire somebody and look to somebody that's not going to have or make mistakes as we step through this process. And he is actually the highest qualified individual in the state of California and the only one that we could get here. And I think that it's well worth it to ensure that we don't have a stumbling block in the system as we're starting up. So he may not have a number of employees to start off with, but his knowledge base and moving us through the organization over the next years, I think, was really important.
Yes, Mr. Goldstein.
I think the other point that I would also add is that this is a fully loaded, this is it. The compensation you see is it. There's no hidden CalPERS costs. So when we're talking about a police chief cost, the police chief's getting compensated around $200,000. You can bet that the actual employee contract is probably on the order of $300,000 when you factor in all the other benefits associated with it. So I know the front end figure is relatively tough to swallow. That said, it's an all-in cost.
Yeah, so roughly 40%, 45% on top of a police chief's salary would be, 300. So I get that. Thank you. Okay.
If
Any
I
other-
might,
You may want to make a comparison, not so much with Santa Clara, but we also had comparisons with Sonoma Clean Power. And
There you go.
that helped me swallow the number a little better. It wasn't just Silicon Valley. It was all of the power companies across the state that have been formed. This is consistent with their executive salaries.
Yes, Mr. Delgado? Did you?
Just
excuse
briefly,
me.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Supervisor Friend. You hit the button, or is that?
I understand why we're paying this amount because of his experience, especially with the Cal ISO and CPUC. You can't get that experience. You have to pay for it. I understand that. My concern is it's a 10-month contract, basically. In the interim, we're still recruiting for a permanent CEO. I didn't see anything in the budget for that. Is there gonna be an appropriation coming back to the policy committee to authorize spending whatever it takes to recruit nationwide for a permanent CEO? I didn't see that in the, is he gonna be part of the process? Because he's obviously gonna know who the
That-
players are.
That's covered by the Administrative Services Agreement because the County of Santa Cruz's Personnel Department will do that work for your boards. And he can be involved if that's what your boards want.
So in the administrative services budget, there is recruitment costs.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Delgado, Marina?
Were there any other applicants?
Yeah, how many there was? I mean, there were four.
I
Yeah,
don't recall the number of total applicants. We had, was it 4 that took through to the final interview process?
I think there were 7 initially. And then
Seven initially, and then we took 4 through to the interview process. It was very clear to us that through that interview process, myself, several other members of the operations board were on that interview, that in Tom, we had a 10, and in the other candidates, they were, qualified, excellent individuals, but we clearly had a number 1 candidate and a number 1 recommendation for the hire. It was very apparent through that process who our best CEO was going to be to start this organization.
Thank you.
Any other board member would like to, anybody from the public would like to address this item number 10, or excuse me, number 9? Okay. This is an action item that to approve the CEO contract. Well, the policy board, this is just the policy board action. You have a motion from a policy board member?
A motion to
By
approve.
Supervisor Friend.
Second.
Second by Trina Kaufman Gomez. All those in favor?
Before
Oh, excuse me,
discussion.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to support the motion and support the hiring of the gentleman. I think he's a good hire, and thank you very much for the subcommittee's work and the process. I know these things are not easy. Negotiations are always tough, and it's also very tough that this employee is aware that, we're talking about his salary, and it's on TV, and it's recorded, and it's in public, so I appreciate his patience, and I'm sure he's going to hear the comments, but I do support him. I think it's an excellent choice. I understand the salary is unusual for us, but I've heard enough justification to support the motion, and look forward to working with him and getting the organization started. And I think he'll be well worth the compensation, and we're going to make him work hard for the salary.
Yeah, you bet.
So we appreciate the work you've done.
Councilman McShane from Salinas.
Yeah, just another word on how exceptional a candidate this guy is. Certainly in my own digging and with the interview that we had, we are so lucky to have his expertise. We probably will gain time and save money significantly by having someone so qualified join us and lead us through this important part. So for those that weren't able to be at the last meeting when we had the chance to interview him, I walked away with my toes curled. Honestly, I think this is a real good choice, and I'm happy to support it.
Is it because he was surfing?
Any other board member? Trina Kaufman Gomez from Watsonville.
I also concur with the dialogue that we've had with the applicant. We were very thorough. We went through the questions. We went through even more questions, ran through scenarios as well. To a launch, it's more than just he's starting from the ground zero. He's already leaped ahead well above that when he's getting started with us. So what we're doing is we're investing in him with what he's already 6 to 8 months ahead of us. He is probably a year and a half ahead of us when it comes to the formation, from what the experiences he's coming in with, and that's the investment that we're putting into for his salary, for him to come and join this organization and really create that solid foundation that we need. We need that Gibraltar foundation for this organization, and who will provide that for us.
Okay. Any other comments from policy board members? Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the contract for our interim CEO. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So ordered unanimously. Now we will go to item number 11, to adopt, or excuse me, 10, to adopt the policy board meeting schedule. And we will be moving, or it's proposed that we will be moving to Watsonville. It'll be a lot easier for acoustics and just the setup. It's, we'll be able to come into the council chamber. Trina Kaufman-Gomez will be welcoming us to Watsonville, I'm sure. But it's going to be much easier for everybody in our recording, the secretary, the whole thing. So anybody have any comments on this? And is there any, well, let me ask the public if they have any comments. Any comments from the public on moving setting our meeting schedule and moving our meeting place from here in Marina? And I want to say thank you, Marina, for allowing us to do this. You've got us off the ground, literally, so it's terrific. But the accommodations will be better in Watsonville, just because of the makeup and what they have in their sound systems and so forth. Any comments from no comments from the public? Any comments from the policy board members? Question, Supervisor Parker or
Thank you.
Monterey?
Just, I imagine that there is the ability to have the meetings video.
Yes.
Video. Great. Thank you. And live streamed?
We've had live.
Yes, we've had live stream for our council meetings.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, now, just so the public knows, I think these dates have been mentioned before. Let's see, do I have them here? Maybe I don't. What is this?
It isn't called out specifically, but after the poll that was conducted, it's going to be the second Wednesday, beginning in September, December, March, and June. So the second Wednesday of those months. But we also may need to call special meetings, and those will be duly noticed.
Okay. Okay, do I have a second for this policy board action? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So ordered unanimously. Now we will go to item number 12, the Monterey Bay, or the MP, excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't know why I get it. Adopt a resolution allowing for future board agenda items. Thank you for keeping me.
This is a pretty simple item that's already been adopted by the operations board. At one of the first meetings, maybe your first joint meeting, there was talk of wanting to have the ability to, at an ongoing meeting, tell staff what future agenda topics you would like. The Brown Act requires that you adopt a rule that allows you to do that, and that's what's before you. Yes.
So it's maybe appropriate for future agendas to indicate somewhere that there's the opportunity to introduce future agenda items should we choose. Yeah. So.
Okay. This is a policy board action. Do I have, so it's moved by Supervisor Friend, seconded by Councilwoman Trina Gomez, or Kaufman-Gomez. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered unanimously. And now, I'm going to get it right, we're going to go to item number 12, the MBCP implementation plan and overview and preparation presentation. Pacific Energy Advisors, Kirby Dussel, will be making this presentation.
Great. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Very exciting to be here. We had the pleasure, I think maybe just introduce myself for a minute. We had the pleasure, our firm did, of working with the county and well, actually the counties in performing the technical study for this particular effort. And so there's been a lot of time spent with David Carlson and Carol and Sean and various others. So this is really neat that you're all here now and kind of moving this process forward. And the item today that we'll be discussing is really kind of a critical item on the path. The CCA implementation plan is one statutory requirement that all programs like yourself must complete as part of their aggregation process. And what I hope to leave you with today is just a better understanding of what that document is, what it isn't, some key pieces of information that need to be included in that document, and then also some key decision points that your organization will need to make in completing that document before it's submitted to the Public Utilities Commission for certification. So, without further ado, thank you, David. Okay, so as I just mentioned, I think it's really important to understand what the document is, what the implementation plan is, and what it isn't. I think a lot of folks have it in mind that this implementation plan will be this really great story that you're going to tell about your organization, what it's going to do, how it's going to look over the coming decades, all the programs you're going to put in place, and the investments that you're going to make in infrastructure, so on and so forth. And that's all great, and those things should all be described, but not in the implementation plan. Under the Public Utilities Code, there are some very specific requirements that need to be addressed, details regarding what they call the consequences and process of aggregation. Consequences has really a negative connotation, but it just means, what are you hoping to do with this aggregation program? What sort of service offerings are you going to make to your customers? How will it be organized? How will it be financed? How will rates be set? Things like that. The document needs to be adopted at a meeting just like this. It's something that you need to make sure you attend to before that document's submitted to the Public Utilities Commission, just a little administrative step. And then, of course, the document is also then reviewed and certified by the California Public Utilities Commission. They have 90 days to do that. So following the date on which you submit it to them, they'll have basically 3 months to take a look at it. They're not approving it, and I think that's a really important distinction. They're not looking at what you're doing and saying, we agree with it. What they're doing is they're looking at it and saying, did you hit all of the different areas that are specified in the Public Utilities Code that need to be addressed? So in many regards, this is kind of a checkbox item, and I think it's really important to keep that in mind when you're looking at this document and how it is that you want to build it out. There's some really great templates out there that have been used by the other aggregation programs, and use of those templates, I think, is really helpful in the sense that it expedites the review of the Public Utilities Commission, and what we've seen so far is that 90-day period can really be condensed down quite a lot through the use of templates that have been previously submitted. Okay, so what is the plan, the I plan as it's referred to here? What is it not? Well, like I said, it's not a story about your organization, all the great works you're going to do. It's not a detailed business plan description of all the different programs you're going to put in place or the tariffs that you're going to offer to customers. And I think it's really important just to kind of acknowledge that, because there will be a time that you'll be able to build out those different program descriptions, those tariff offerings for customers, and that will all be done with time. But initially, you just need to get the program started, and you can deal with those things a little bit more fully as you go. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. All right, so what's required? There's some very specific elements, and they're all listed here. You'll see them in the Public Utilities Code as well if you choose to go there and look at it. But the key areas that need to be addressed in the implementation plan are these: the organizational structure of your particular agency here, the rate setting process and what sort of costs will be passed on to customers, how will the organization be financed, where are you getting your money, how are you going to pay it back. In terms of the rate setting process, what does that look like? What's the timing like? How often do you set rates? How much notice do you provide to customers, and do you allow for public review? Those sorts of things. And then how are costs allocated amongst customers? So is this a cost of service based rate setting process, as is the case with most utilities? You actually look at what it costs to serve different customer groups and try to set a rate that generally reflects that cost of service, describing those details. Then also the different methods for entering into contracts. Are you going to use competitive solicitations, sole source agreements in certain select instances, things like that. And then also a description of the different parties that are going to be providing electric products to your organization. I think maybe just on that last item, it's important to recognize that we probably won't have those details in place at the time that implementation plan is submitted to the Public Utilities Commission, and I think it's important to leave you with the thought that that's okay. I think it's satisfactory. It's been satisfactory in the past to provide a description of the process that you'll be using, what that process looks like, the schedule, how it is that you'll be evaluating these different suppliers that are going to be submitting bids and the like. The Public Utilities Commission knows who's out there in terms of the different suppliers that are available, so I don't think there's a whole lot of mystery in their mind of who it is that might be ultimately working with you in serving your customers, but describing that process is kind of a key piece of the puzzle. And on the next slide, you can kind of see in the template, I mentioned the document templates that have been used very effectively in meeting this requirement. You can see here in the table how the different statutory requirements that are spec'd out in the Public Utilities Code are addressed in different chapters of the document. And that this is really all that is. It's just kind of mapping those different requirements to the document template that's been developed. Next slide. So there are some key things that you'll need to give a little bit of thought to in developing this implementation plan. All right, you'll get to see a little bit better now. And those items are really focused on areas that are unique to your organization. So who are the members? Finalizing that information to the extent that hasn't already been done. What sort of service offerings will you be making to your customers? Will you have a default product that customers will be enrolled in at the time of their service commencement? What will that look like generally in terms of the renewable content? Will you be offering an upgraded offering, maybe a 100% renewable energy service option? We certainly studied that and addressed that in the technical report that was produced, and maybe you'll choose to do that going forward, so we memorialize that in the implementation plan. What would your general rate and pricing strategy be? Will your rates generally mirror those of the incumbent utility, PG&E? There's a lot of reasons to do that. It simplifies rate comparisons, and the transition from investor-owned utility to CCE service is a little bit easier to understand for customers when rate structures look similar after that transition. What sort of programs will you be offering? Again, not a detailed description of what those programs are, but what do you intend to do? Will you offer a net energy metering program for customers that have on-site renewable generation, for example? Will you offer a feed-in tariff for locally situated renewable energy projects? Energy efficiency, do you intend at some point in the future to administer programs to address your constituents? Things like that. And then in terms of the customer enrollment process, how will that be orchestrated? How many phases of customers do you intend to enroll? What are the sizes of those phases? When will they be occurring? And how will that be built out throughout the enrollment period? And then, of course, a description of your organizational structure, the fact that you've got different boards and committees and an executive now. Congratulations on that. Tom's great. Worked with him in the past on the Silicon Valley Initiative, and you've got a winner there. And describing the responsibilities that Tom will have in his capacity as your chief executive, as well as a description of staff that you intend to use, consultants and the like. So in terms of kind of speccing out some additional detail on these different items that'll need to be addressed in the implementation plan, just kind of wanted to walk you through some thoughts, and to the extent that you have questions or want to talk about this, please stop me and we can do that. I think probably be good if we just kind of take these things as they go. Feel free to interrupt me.
Excuse me, can I just ask a process question
Sure.
as we're going through this? So you're going to be telling us some areas where we need to make decisions about what's going to be in the plan. You're not expecting us to make those decisions today, right? You're highlighting them, and then we're going to come back at another time to really give direction or make decisions?
That's correct. So essentially what's going to happen is that today we're just kind of making you aware of these items. The implementation plan will then be drafted with what will amount to placeholders in these different areas, and then my understanding is that you'll have an opportunity to comment on those areas, and we can hone in on what is most important to you, what's most appropriate to reflect in the document.
Thank you. And just one other process type question. What's the mechanism for us to get Mr. Hibashi's input if that's desired?
Interestingly enough, he's already starting to provide input, and been communicating with him a little bit on that. He's actually gone through and marked up a draft of the implementation plan. So you talked about him being ahead of the game. He really is ahead of the game. So, yeah. So I mentioned a little bit before about the different retail service offerings that you might choose to offer to your customers, and so these are things that you just need to give some thought to. What does that look like initially? What sort of clean energy content do you desire to reflect in your default service offering? Do you desire to also offer 100% renewable energy product as well? And how do those things look? How might they be priced? Things like that. I think one of the things that I just want to make sure I probably repeat several times over in communicating this information is just make sure when the draft is put together for the plan that you allow considerable flexibility as it relates to details. So, if you set something very, very specific, just know that that's now kind of on the record. And to the extent that the market maybe changes a little bit, or product availability isn't what you thought it would be, that could compromise your ability to move forward under a particular plan. So just keep that in mind, allowing flexibility. You can see here a couple of examples of the way that renewable energy content thresholds were characterized in previous implementation plans, and in the case of MCE, which launched back in 2010, they set a very manageable bar and then really intended to exceed that. But the whole point is that in setting this 25% renewable threshold for their default product, they knew that they could move the program forward based on market conditions and the like, and then of course advance that metric at a pace that was acceptable to the board and also considerate of market conditions as well. And then also, most of the programs to date have spec'd out the availability of a net energy metering program for customers. Maybe not building out all the different details and incentives that might be made available to those customers, but articulating that those programs would be available. And we can move on to the next slide. And this is really an important one, the item of rate setting, and how it is that rates and the rate relationship to the incumbent utility is characterized in the plan. You can imagine that it's very easy, based on technical information and rate comparisons that are done on a preliminary basis, to want to make claims that would resonate with customers about the nature of the rate relationship to the incumbent utility, and in particular communicating certain levels of savings that might be desirable. But I think here, this is one area where it's just, it's probably a good idea to consider being a little bit more general in terms of that rate relationship, and maybe simply note that the program at launch will offer rates that are at or below those of the incumbent utility. So it's really more of a threshold issue. We move forward if we can do this. If we can't, we don't. And then the level of the rate discount, if any, that's something that could be really addressed more clearly and cleanly prior to launch. And so you can kind of see here some examples that have been provided about ways to handle information like that I think provide that necessary flexibility, as opposed to examples that do not. I think we can go ahead and, maybe one more point here on this slide. Just worth noting that typical discount programs that customers are used to participating in, and those will all remain available post MVCP service commencement, because those discounts are all offered on the distribution or delivery side of the rate. So you can set your rates as you see fit, and that customer will remain unaffected. They will still receive that discount that they're used to. So I just wanted to make sure to point that out as well.
Kirby, at the same time, what about premium sort of products that are available? Folks that demand or want guaranteed power at high peak times?
Yeah, so there, that's a good question. So there are certain customers, for example, that are on standby rates, yes, or various other customized rates based on the nature of their business. Say large energy users, commercial and industrial customers that do have those peak loads, and those typically tend to be those situations are addressed via customized tariffs. And I think you can allude to the fact through the articulation of your phase-in plan and then also kind of the general rate concepts that you'll be folding in to the document. Your intent to serve those customers on a particular schedule and at a particular rate that's generally competitive with that of the incumbent utility. But I think some of those cases, it's really key that you get into the data, get into the interval data that's available from the incumbent utility to truly understand the ebbs and flows of their energy usage, so you don't wind up making a commitment to do something that really might not be in the best interest of the customer. Because for some of those entities, if they have really big swings throughout the day where they can jump, say, from no load at all to 100 megawatts and do that in a very short period of time, you need to understand that for a variety of reasons. I mean, because there are, market-based costs that this organization will incur. And so I would say those sorts of situations are oftentimes addressed in kind of an additional phase. So if you look at some of the implementation plans out there, you'll see a phase 1 and a phase 2 and a phase 3, and various combinations of residential and commercial customers will be, packaged in those phases. But then there'll be kind of this extra phase that's noted in the document where you can deal with those special cases and allow yourself the time to do it, as best you can. Okay. All right, so on we go to complementary energy programs. I know this is a really important area, not just for this organization, but for the stakeholders and prospective customers as well. And this is also an area where I think you need to be really careful about getting out and, too far in front of yourself. Because a lot of the information that's needed to effectively put these programs together, you'll learn as you go. You'll understand what sort of administrative budget you're going to have available based on the revenues generated by the program, what sort of staff you'll need in order to effectively administer those programs, and you really won't know that all necessarily at the time of launch. You'll certainly know maybe that you want to launch an energy efficiency program, but oftentimes it's a good idea to get in there, understand how it is that your customers use energy, where it is that those programs would be most effectively dispatched, so that you can build those out in a way that's cost effective and also effective in terms of achieving the savings that you'd ultimately like to get. It is a good idea, though, to have an idea of how much, say, power you'd like to save through an energy efficiency program. Are you hoping to shave 1% or 2% or 5% off of your annual energy requirements, and folding those sorts of details into the plan on a timeline that's reasonable as well. And you can see here down at the bottom that, I use MCE and Sonoma Clean Power as examples, but, they definitely made mention of these ancillary programs and the fact that they would be really kind of key elements of their program, but not specking out all the details at the time the implementation plan was submitted. And so program phase-in. This is another, I think, important area that has a lot of potential impacts on the revenues generated by MVCP. And in particular, I think it's important to note the seasonality of rates for certain customer classes. Commercial customers in particular pay relatively high rates during the summer period, relatively low rates during the winter period. And to the extent that you choose to enroll those customers during those winter months, you may be doing so at an operating loss. And that's usually the way the annual revenue collection cycle works with commercial accounts. You tend to collect more than your costs during the summer months, and then you tend to collect less during the winter months. So to the extent that you choose to phase those customers in at certain times a year, it could affect program economics. So that's just something important to be aware of there. And of course, your ability to roll in customers and include customers will be highly influenced by the level of capital that you have available. You can imagine you'll enroll these customers will begin receiving electric power. You will, of course, have to pay for that power oftentimes before they pay you for that power. So you'll have to have that working capital on hand. And to the extent you have larger phases during the initial operating months of your program, that can kind of put you in a cash stressed situation. So you just need to be mindful of that and size your phases appropriately. And then, of course, constructing phases is also, it can be a contentious issue because there are always these questions that come up about, well, how broadly are we going to address the different geographic regions? And because you have such a large geographic footprint and you have customers that are likely very excited about being in this program, how do we go about selecting who's in first and who's in second, who's in third, and do we do that across a broad group of customers, meaning residential, commercial, industrial, and the like, or do we focus maybe on a narrower slice? And so these are all decisions that you'll need to make as part of the process as well. And then we can go on to the next slide. Organization, I don't think we need to spend too much time on this one, and there are a lot of great examples in the existing implementation plans that are out there about how these items are discussed, what level of detail is really necessary and appropriate. And I think you've got a great opportunity here to do a lot of find and replace in those documents, take advantage of that, because there will be similarities and maybe a few differences, but I think those are fairly easy to fold in. We can go on to the next one. And I mentioned this before about the prospective energy suppliers, and I think what you'll have to include in the document, based on where you are in your timeline, will be mostly commentary about the process, right? That first bullet point, I think we can replace won't likely with won't occur in advance of I-plan submittals, so you really won't have your suppliers selected. That process in terms of the development of necessary solicitation documents will be underway, but you won't have a short list. You won't have much information to offer in that regard, but you will be able to comment on the process and the timeline and the like. And you can see here that that's kind of been an effective tactic in filling in the document for other programs too. And let's see, just a couple more slides if we can go on to the next one. One of the things that we'll be doing as part of this task that we've been hired to perform is updating your pro forma operating projections. Those were last updated in November of 2016, and of course since that time PG&E's put in a new schedule of rates. Exit fees have changed a little bit, though I believe we captured some of that in the previous modeling. And so we'll want to refresh those numbers, and also wholesale market prices, which still remain very favorable for buyers like yourself, just to get a better sense, a clearer sense for what that path ahead looks like in terms of the numbers. And also in doing this, we'll want to make sure we get some feedback from you about what that phase-in plan looks like, just how many phases we want to go through in terms of enrolling customers, so that pro forma can really accurately reflect, as best as possible anyway, what you expect your operating results to look like during those first 10 years really of operations. So the next slide, if you will, David. This kind of ties into the last slide related to the pro forma operating projection update. There were some definite changes in the combination of PG&E generation rates and exit fees, which kind of on net amounted to a 15% reduction in the rate to beat, if you will. And so we'll want to take a closer look at that. I think all signs point to this still being a very, very favorable comparison in terms of the rates that can be offered to customers, the reserves that can be accrued for this organization, as well as the surplus operating revenues that can be generated. There's no reason to believe that won't be the case, but it's always just prudent to take a look and confirm that, so we'll want to do that. Also just wanted to point out that, with more and more CCE programs implementing service throughout the state of California, and in particular PG&E service territory, their retail sales base has been declining pretty rapidly. And one of the things that happens when that sales base declines is that it really has the effect of cleaning, if you will, PG&E's supply portfolio. And so they jumped pretty considerably in 2016, up to nearly, 69% GHG free. So 33% renewable, as well as nuclear power, which is deemed GHG free, and then of course hydroelectric power being the three categories that make up that carbon free element of their portfolio. So 69%, I think, up from about 60% in 2015, and we expect that to go even higher in 2017 based on the fact that we've got programs like Silicon Valley Clean Energy that are going through their implementation in 2017. Peninsula Clean Energy is phasing in additional customers as well, and that really all has the effect of course, just pushing PG&E's carbon-free content up and up and up, throwing a really good hydro year like we had, and you can see how this all works out. At the end of the day, I think the message is it's really good for the customer. They get kind of clean and cleaner, and I think that's kind of the idea. And then the last slide I believe I have is one just on, oh, go ahead. Of course.
Was it declining oil prices, or were there other reasons why PG&E reduced their 15%?
Yeah, so it's really, and I probably could have done a better job of framing that particular point. So the reduction in the rate to beat was really a function of PG&E's exit fees increasing. And the reason that PG&E's exit fees increased is because, well, there's a number of factors, but essentially wholesale market prices are very, very low. And when wholesale market prices are very, very low, the relative cost of PG&E's supply portfolio is high. And so it's that difference between their total portfolio cost and the market benchmark that really informs how that exit fee is calculated. And because that gap grew a bit, that exit fee increased. And so when we perform rate comparisons for CCE programs, what we're really looking at is comparing PG&E's generation rate to the CCE generation rate plus the exit fees, so the total cost to the customer. On a rate-to-rate basis, if you just look at the generation rates alone, the CCE wins out enormously. But including that exit fee is a really key piece of the puzzle, because it really completes the comparison from a customer's perspective as to how this looks on the bill. And because that exit fee went up, it means that the CCE generation rate needs to be that much lower in order to compete against the utility. Because it's probably just worth pointing out too that that exit fee is embedded in the investor-owned utility generation rate. They don't section that out. So if you're a customer of PG&E like you are now, you're basically paying that, but you're paying that as an embedded cost in the generation rate. But when you move over to CCE service, that falls out as a separate line item. And so that's the comparison we're talking about. And because that exit fee dropped, CCE generation rates also have to drop to remain competitive.
And is the exit fee a one-time fee to the customer, or is it monthly?
It's monthly, yeah. So it's billed on a per kilowatt hour basis, just like a typical energy charge is. And the idea is that over time, and I'm talking about many years, as the contracts that contribute to PG&E's total portfolio cost fall off, so they expire, that exit fee should go down. But in the interim, market changes may affect some peaks and valleys in that charge. And recently, that charge has gone up. And it's gone up pretty considerably because the market has fallen off so significantly. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Question.
Yeah.
So is the exit fee subject to approval of the PUC?
It is, yeah, it is. There's a methodology that's approved. Data is provided to the Public Utilities Commission. Those calculations occur based on the agreed upon methodology and very specific parameters about what data is included in performing that calculus. And so it is a process that's overseen, it's updated annually, and then that charge remains in effect for the entirety of a calendar year.
Okay, and maybe not for this discussion, but remembering back when we had presentations at the councils, we were informed that there might be a marketing ploy or tool that we would include and cover the consumers exit cost as part of our marketing outreach. So if you could address that, how that plays into what we would be putting together in portfolios for offering, because obviously we want the customers to have the choice, pick the most viable choice for them that fits their needs. But if we want consumers to come to us, obviously the price has got to be a good move. So if it's going up on the PG&E side, that makes it a little bit harder for us to compete to include that price. So how do we address that?
Yeah, good question. So I think just mathematically, maybe I'll start with that. So you can imagine if PG&E's generation rate is 8 cents a kilowatt hour, we'll just use that as an example, and the exit fee is 2 cents, then that means you've got to basically be 6 cents or better on your generation rate in order for the customer to come out ahead. And where power costs are on the wholesale market nowadays, that's still viable to be able to do that. And so that's really the relationship that you're looking to kind of measure as you go through and figure out how rates are going to compare both now and in the future, is what does that PG&E generation rate look like? What is that exit fee likely to be? And after you know those two pieces of the puzzle, it's really solving for that last variable, which is what do my wholesale power costs need to be at or below in order to make that relationship at or below what we're seeing in the utility space. And right now that's possible. And I think, based on where wholesale power markets are, based on where renewable energy prices have fallen to, I mean, now we're seeing, photovoltaic solar prices that are, in the mid to high $20 range at times, which just 5-6 years ago we were seeing $300 photovoltaic solar prices. So things have really changed, and they've changed in favor of the buyer. And so I think it allows for that relationship in terms of the costs to exist at a point where the customers are able to save money initially. And of course, just like any energy related operation, that rate relationship can change over time. And it's really about managing that relationship as best you possibly can through, competitive solicitation processes that are administered on a regular basis and so on and so forth. Just doing, being diligent about that effort in order to try to preserve the lowest possible portfolio cost for your customers so that cost relationship can remain in the customer's favor. Welcome. And so I think this is the last slide that I've got for you, and I guess I just want to point out that this timeline here was laid out really before I had some discussions with Tom, to be perfectly honest with you. And so this is a little bit more drawn out than I think Tom would like to see. And what Tom's hoping for is essentially cutting off maybe, I want to say about 6 weeks or about half of this timeline so that we can allow more months essentially before you commence service next year to address key items like power contracting and various other obligations that you have. So I've got Sean sitting next to me. I'm going to hand the mic to her because she'll fill you in on the changes.
Okay. Thanks, Kirby. Okay, so Kirby is correct that in discussions with Tom over the last week, he has requested that we figure out a way to kind of expedite this process so that we can receive our certification and get into negotiations and contract for power supply sooner than later, since the market is advantageous. So what we're looking at right now is that Kirby alluded to earlier, there's a draft already underway, and Tom has provided some feedback on that. The current plan is to bring a completed draft for discussion and feedback to the operations board at its regularly scheduled meeting on August 2nd. So one thing we want to do today is confirm that we will have a quorum at that meeting. The ops board will have a chance to provide feedback, in particular on some of the elements that Kirby outlined here just today. And then the plan would be then to go back, revise the document, and bring it to the policy board, which we will be requesting a special meeting on August 16th, which is a Wednesday. again, if there's any possible way to kind of do a quick straw poll, raise your hand, availability for the 16th. It would come before the policy board with, we hope, the recommendation of the ops board for discussion and adoption at your meeting on the 16th of August, so that on the 17th or 18th, we push send to the California Public Utilities Commission. Our hope is that the implementation plan is certified by the end of October. And this is really a month in advance, because when we start getting into Thanksgiving and the early holidays, things slow down. And so that's the concern that we're trying to mitigate for, to make sure that we're good to go to begin negotiating with power suppliers and get everything in line, so that you all are setting rates and doing what you need to be doing at the end of this year and the beginning of next. So that's the rationale behind the accelerated schedule. And I don't know if there's any other questions about that.
Maybe while you're formulating your questions, I think that schedule that Sean just articulated, and the timeline that would allow in terms of certification by the Public Utilities Commission, it works out pretty well for you. Typically, if you get into the month of December and the latter half of the month of December, you wind up obviously butting up against vacations and staff availability, and when you're dealing with energy suppliers, their risk management teams or credit teams or power purchase agreement counsel, they just might not be available, which can push the execution and final pricing timelines in a way that might not work out very ideally for you. So one other thing is just that power markets generally tend to be pretty illiquid at the very end of the year, and so if you can avoid getting into that last week of December to do any deals, I think it works out in your favor.
Any other questions from board members? Supervisor Friend?
I just have, and maybe this question is too deep into the process and you're not ready for this answer yet, but my concern is reliability. And you mentioned it really briefly about, the winter months when most of the renewable energies are limited because of the shorter days, because of the storms, whatever. If PG&E is the only source available, and that's where we have to go because of the reliability, the difference in the prices, who's going to see that difference in price?
Yeah, so good question. So from a reliability perspective, I think one kind of key piece of the puzzle to just think about and have in your mind is that it's really less about PG&E influencing reliability than it is about the California Independent System Operator influencing reliability. At the end of the day, the ISO is the organization that's going to dispatch generators in order to maintain reliability on California's bulk electric system. And so what we'll be doing here at this organization is entering into a fixed price contract or contracts for electric power that will insulate you substantially from the ebbs and flows that prices will inevitably undergo at certain times of year. And so you will be protected substantially from those price fluctuations, and it will only be on the margins where you will have some I guess, risk. But that's no different than any other organization. So to the extent that prices go very high or go very low at particular times a day during particular seasons, you'll be protected from that to a point where your customers won't have any of these adverse impacts.
And thank you, I understand that, Mike.
Okay.
My concern is at current levels, there's 7,200 megawatts available for the state. Whoever contributes that to the Cal ISO. In December, there may be only 6,800 megawatts available. If our demand is greater, somebody has to go import that from coal fire, from gas fire, wherever that is available. There's going to be considerable difference in both generation, transportation distances, and reliability. And I'm just concerned that I know Cal ISO is going to gather the pool and distribute the pool, But if the pool's smaller, obviously, there's only so much, they're gonna have to go find other generation. And there could be huge price differences in there. I just can't imagine them setting a price low enough that benefits us and it's never gonna affect that other issue.
Yeah, I just, maybe just one comment in terms of, literal reliability, actually kind of keeping lights on and things like that. The fleet of generators that exists today that's serving you as a customer and others throughout the state, that's not likely to change much at all between now and the end of the year. Sure, there may be some new projects that come online, and sure, there may be some generators that are offline for maintenance and things like that. But that pool of resources doesn't change whether or not this program forms or it doesn't form.
I understand that, and a lot of the coal-fired, gas-fired plants are 70 years old, and they're going away in the next 3 to 4 years. You're not going to see Pittsburgh, Contra Costa, Moss Landing, Memorial Bay's already gone. So you're going to see a lot less of that, and they're going to be more dependent on the alternative energy groups, which are limited. And that's my concern is we'll sign a contract with our customers, and I'd hate to see us not be able to provide that contract because the supply is just not there.
Yeah, I think that, go ahead. I was just going to say that one of the good news situations, I guess, is that for, the first time, and really, I don't want to say ever, but I think it's ever, the state of California is, they're experiencing hours during the day where we have way too much generation, and that's likely to continue based on all the build out for renewable generation and the like. And so, I think there are some offsetting effects that will probably mute some of the price risk that you're talking about. Oddly enough now at certain times of day when load is very low in the state and production is very high, when you've got photovoltaic solar, cranking out at a, near capacity, we're actually paying other states to take power. Prices are negative, which is kind of an odd situation. So
well, and the Western Power Grid is 13 western states that feed into it and draw from it. So that's always been that way.
I think just as a maybe just a comparative matter, none of the other CCAs have really experienced these risks or issues at a level that is anything more than standard business so far. So, I kind of expect that those situations will be manageable operationally and contractually, and you'll be insulated substantially from them as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, just a procedural question, Kirby. Statutorily, you have to adopt and consider the I-plan in a public hearing. Are there any other requirements that for public engagement with either customers or the public in general in the adoption process?
As it relates to the implementation plan, no. So we'll just have to have this body adopt, the implementation plan. That's usually done via resolution, and that resolution is typically attached to the implementation plan when it goes into the Public Utilities Commission. And once you get your letter back from the Public Utilities Commission indicating that they've certified your plan, then that really kickstarts the next phase of CCE implementation, which is the various registration activities, bond posting, and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, for the implementation plan alone, it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Any other questions from board members? Any questions from the public on this matter? Yes, sir.
Yeah, this could be a question.
Is that on? Maybe so. Go ahead.
Yeah, for the board or for Pacific Energy, I was wondering, and the last update I got was back in May on Senate Bill 618. And last time I was here, you said you had the legislative people that looked into this and kept on top of all this stuff. Primarily, they read it and summarized it as tying the hands of CCEs. I'm wondering if Pacific Energy or the board has any update on that, and then that maybe.
We are going to discuss legislative update later,
Okay. So it'll
item
be
number
on there.
14, but
618 is on there.
All right, thank you.
It's all good.
so,
Just a video thing, maybe in the future meetings. We are talking about energy in the future, and there's just plastic bottles with water everywhere. Maybe we could do glass with
okay. Go on.
water and.
Let's talk about the implementation plan. Anybody else for the public would like to address this? Okay. This is just really a discussion matter. Is there anything else that you wanted to close on? Any other questions? We'll just move on to, oh, excuse me, Carol Johnson.
Sorry about that. I think before we leave this item, since we're on the topic, we want to make sure that we will have a quorum at both the Operations Board on August 2nd and at the proposed special meeting for the Policy Board on August 16th. So what I'd like to do here is maybe a show of hands for people who know. Let's start with the Ops Board on August 2nd. Does anyone know for sure they cannot be there because we require 6 for a quorum?
I can send an alternate.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay, great. So alternates can be sent. Super. So it looks like we're good to go for August 2nd. So that'll be the main agenda item for you guys to really dive in and focus on that, provide feedback, and both Tom and Kirby will be with you that day, I believe. And August 16th, is there, and I know you guys may not have your calendars in front of you, but is there anyone who knows for sure they cannot be there on the 16th?
Are you talking 9 a.m.?
What I'd like to say is Supervisor Del Cruz also has a meeting and Mayor Blasco.
What kind of a meeting? Is it?
We have a conflicting meeting, we already have a meeting scheduled.
On the 16th? Okay. And I'm sorry, sir, what city are you from?
Supervisor.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that.
So would you have any San Benito representation at all then?
Other than the city of Hollister.
Okay. Did anybody else, or somebody else? Is there anybody else that will not be able to make it?
9 a.m.
That is, I think that's what is proposed.
And both in Watsonville, is that correct?
I wasn't able to check on the
Okay.
availability of the Watsonville, but Marina Library as of yesterday was available for the 8:16 meeting.
Okay.
August 2nd for sure in Watsonville, 8:16 TBD, but right now that's what we're looking at, 9 o'clock. And we'll let you know whether it's here or in Watsonville, and we need at least 6 of you there to hopefully adopt the implementation plan and keep the train moving.
All right.
Okay,
That's,
thank you very much.
Discussion item. Okay, now we discussed communications a little earlier. We'll go to item number 13, communications and outreach plan, presentation by Bill Maxfield.
Thank you. I'm Bill Maxfield. I'm principal with Miller Maxfield. We're a full-service marketing communications firm locally, and it's been a real honor and pleasure to work on this project. I just want to say that, and with this project team, and also including Jenny Johnson before she leaves the room. Okay. So we came on board partway through the prior phase of community outreach. So we came on board in March of 2016. There had been about 50 presentations and community engagements to date at that point. Through the end of last year, that essentially doubled, and that was due in part to great partnerships of the ambassadors that had worked on this program on a volunteer basis, as well as the Romero Institute, whom we heard from earlier today. In the prior phase, we really helped push the brand out into the community. We developed various forms of printed materials, some of which are in the room with us today. On the back table, there's some brochures and fact sheets and whatnot, and the banner that you see in the corner. we produced a web-based video that was a key component of presentations throughout last year, and conducted stakeholder interviews, and really kept a focus on reaching decision makers and stakeholders as it related to moving this project forward to a JPA milestone. Now, with that behind us, we pivot to the next phase where we really want to reach consumers and help the consumers throughout the region in the 19 jurisdictions become prepared for the enrollment period that will commence in 2018. So really our task from now through the end of the year, per the contract that was approved by the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors, is to maintain awareness, build awareness, reach consumers, make it so that there are as few questions as possible, that people are ready to enter the enrollment phase. So the major activities anticipated to do that, I will talk to some degree to, which is up here on the screen and in the packet. One of the first tasks, I want to return to Jane's comment earlier, is that website. And just to reiterate that point, the website was created by volunteers. One of the first tasks that we did in the prior phase was to establish a URL that aligned with the Monterey Bay Community Power brand, so that's the mbcommunitypower.org URL. What will happen next is to build an appropriate public sector website that is still attached to that same URL. So that's going to be a critical early task that we will do. But before we get to even doing that, we're going to create a plan, and it's not the easiest thing to see up there, but it's up there at the very top that we will establish a marketing plan. We intend to do that this month, and we will do that with input and collaboration from the new CEO, as well as the project team. The strategies that we're looking at in this, it's really an outline because we haven't had an opportunity to create a detailed plan yet, so I'm going to call this an outline, is a mix of strategies that is hitting as many available channels as we can find to reach consumers throughout the region. So you see in this plan a mix of some revised printed materials that already exist, that we will tune those up. We will carry forward with the existing logo and name. We will continue to invest in that brand. We will support it through, in addition to the website, there will be an update to the existing video, and those outreach strategies will be aimed at creating a sense of anticipation about, and you see it a little bit in this corner board back here, that we have something coming in spring 2018, and we want to create that anticipation and even demand for it. We will also use social media, earned media, which would be connecting with our local media throughout the region, all the way down to very local news outlets in each community throughout the region. We will do community outreach in the form of attending events, tabling at events, sponsoring events where that makes sense. That also, sort of an extension of that concept, is being present at all 3 county fairs. We pursued that strategy last year to some success, and with limited resources, this time we want to have an even stronger presence at those county fairs. So that gives you sort of a flavor of what we want to do, and I anticipate that there may be questions about that, but about any of those strategies. But I want to just make clear that where we are is a place where we have a pretty strong brand, and what we want to do is invest in that brand to extend the awareness of that brand beyond stakeholders and key decision makers and really reach consumers now. And that we will do that through multiple channels, and that the details of how we will do that, what the mix is in terms of the budget and emphasis on each of those different channels will be the product that we get through that development of the community outreach plan, and then we will do that with the CEO and the team. Happy to take questions.
Yeah.
From Salinas.
Bill Maxfield.
Bill, so how do we book your team? If we want to, there's a tabling event that we think might be appropriate. Is there a phone number or email?
We'll roll that out to the whole team, the whole crew here. We definitely want to have those ideas. We see this as a collaborative, very much a collaborative effort. We have a good sense from having done this over the last year of each of the communities in the region and being based in the region. We have that, but we know that there are plenty of new ideas and new events and new ways to partner, including continuing to partner with the Romero folks. So we will definitely open up that channel.
Yeah, and do you have much of a plan for Grassroots? Like, are you going to the potluck on Saturday? And I mean, how are you going to cultivate the hundreds of folks that are really excited and kind of empower them?
We envision that a part of this plan will be a greater build out of the ambassador corps, if you will, that has been a part of this effort historically. And I think that crew of people is going to be important for executing what you're talking about.
And then do you have swag?
There will be swag.
When?
I think that we've got that scoped for this fall is our initial thinking. And we're certainly open to ideas about that.
Thanks.
Yep.
A follow-up to
Councilman
Steve's
Stoga.
question. So do you anticipate this ambassador corps to be the volunteer capacity to get into the nooks and crannies of each community?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think it'll be a joint effort. We intend to be in a number of those nooks and crannies directly ourselves, but but yes, we definitely want to see the volunteer effort because we're not going to be, with the budget available and the staff, we're not going to be able to do that all on our own. It's going to take a team.
And do you have an email address that we can talk offline about different
Absolutely.
ideas?
Yes. My email address is bill@millermaxfield.com, and I'm happy to give you a card afterward.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the policy board? Operation, any questions from the public? Could you go up to the mic, please? That'd be fine.
I was just, my name's Laura Solorio, and I'm from Salinas and part of the Measure Z campaign, and I know a lot of our outreach was in Spanish, and the Spanish language venues can sometimes be different, and will the website also be bilingual?
Yes, that's a great question, and I'm sorry I didn't mention that before. It will be bilingual. Our materials will continue to be bilingual as they are now, and I think it's an important point for everybody to understand that we view this as not a matter of translating materials and everything has to be bilingual. Yes to that, but it's also about being bicultural and being culturally literate and understanding that some events, the approach may be different based on language, and we'll be focusing on that.
Any other questions from the public?
My name is Margaret Rebecki with Romero Institute. One of the things when we were doing our grassroots talking to people, giving the fact sheets, is that we had to simplify the message. We had to explain, not just give them the fact sheet, explain the whole, we had to simplify, especially for our Latinos and for the other people too. But that will be very, very important, is simplify the message and whatever, you're going to give out the information to our people.
Agreed.
Thank you. Any other questions or statements from the public? Okay. Thank you. Anything else from the board members come up? Okay, thank you, Bill. And you want any closing comments? You're anxious to go?
I think one thing to keep in mind is that we see this period as I mentioned earlier, preparing for that enrollment phase. And we're going to want to, and I think it's going to be really even more important given the speeding up of the timeline a little bit, that we do the maximum amount of work possible so that we're ready to go when the implementation plan dictates as such. So that means preparing very clear planning for the direct mail notifications that need to go out and having a very clear understanding of what level of advertising and other up-level marketing efforts need to happen once we do enter the enrollment phase, because the enrollment phase we do anticipate will be a greater investment of budget and energy to reach consumers. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will go down to item number 14, the regulatory and legislative update. Is that John?
Okay, so I will keep this relatively brief. So what we're proposing here is that the regulatory and legislative updates become a regular feature of your board meetings, just so that you're kept abreast of what's happening at the California Public Utility Commission and also at the state legislature. I will remind you that your board in May approved membership in CalCCA, which is the new statewide trade association that is knee-deep in all of these issues at the commission as well as at the legislature. And your membership was recently approved, and so we'll be plugging in to that group on a monthly basis with all of their phone calls and all of that. So here's a quick recap of the priority proceedings as well as bills. This is not all of them. So we're just highlighting a couple of the ones that statewide CCAs and CalCCA are tracking. So the first one up here are regulatory proceedings. The first to report on is that on May 19th, the CPUC and the California Energy Commission hosted a joint en banc, that's a fancy word for a workshop, regarding the future of retail electricity in the state of California. And that did feature CCA as a component of a broader discussion around what the energy markets may look like in this state, moving from a wholesale-focused market into a full retail market, as we see and in other parts of the country that are a deregulated model. So this is nothing that is likely to happen quickly. However, they do expect, they meaning the attorneys that we work with and CalCCA, we do expect to see a rulemaking that will be open to look at the future of retail choice in California, and that'll be a separate rulemaking, not specifically related to CCA, but certainly something that we're going to be tracking very carefully as we go forward here. I should also say that part of your packet includes a regulatory report with lots of detail that I'm not going to bore you with today, but I do encourage, if you have any questions at all, we're happy to answer them and to put you in touch with the right people if you have detailed legal questions. So that's the first one. The next is really the topic du jour for CCAs in this state, has to do with this power charge and difference adjustment, or exit fee, as we were just discussing a little bit ago, and its reform, as well as a portfolio allocation methodology application that was submitted as a counterproposal by the utilities. And so this is where it's at with respect to how the utilities are allowed to be compensated for the stranded assets, for the contracts that are now being not met because you have a lot of departing customers through CCA, direct access, and other alternative options. So where this stands right now, I'm sorry, I'm going to look at my computer a little because I got an update last night. Essentially, the utilities PAM application was declined by the CPUC. So in essence, what that means is that an alternative PAM can be submitted as part of a separate rulemaking for the PCIA. So the thing that came out of all of that is that there will be a separate and distinct rulemaking process through the CPUC for PCIA. Any future utility proposals would be included in that process rather than tracked on any kind of a separate process. And that was an important procedural issue, just to make sure that this whole thing goes properly down the track. The OIR, Order of Instituting Rulemaking, requires that respondents file comments on the scope of the rulemaking by July 31. That's going to be happening on your behalf through CalCCA. And this is something that we will be watching and reporting on as we go forward. The next up is integrated resource planning and compliance requirements. Some of you may recall that the integrated resource plan requirements were part of SB 350, which passed at the end of 2015, requiring a number of additional renewable energy portfolios and requirements related to increasing the level of renewable power in our state. And so for CCAs, all operational CCAs will be required to submit an IRP. It is potentially likely that MBCP will have to submit its first one in 2018. I was just asking Kirby about that. The rules around the IRP and the content scope is not done yet. And so we do expect a draft decision from the commission on the IRP coming up in August or September. So we'll be looking at that and responding as necessary. The comments for the scope of the IRP are due today. CalCCA is providing comment. MBCP is part of that as a member of CalCCA. So we'll be watching that and reporting back to you guys on what your requirements will be. Your program will be over 700 gigawatt hours, and so right now the threshold they're looking at is that there will be a substantial IRP requirement for programs that are over 700 gigawatt hours a year. If you were a teeny tiny little program, the requirements are substantially less. So we will be looking at the whole ball of wax, and Kirby's going to be helping out with that, I expect, and we'll have more to report going forward. Next up is the CCA bond requirements. Opening testimony on this issue is at the end of this month on July 28th. A quick recap on what that's all about. Right now, the CCA bond is set at a flat $100,000 requirement that stays in an escrow account, if you will, with the CPUC. So that would be filed with the CPUC at the beginning of next year when the service agreement is ratified, and you have to have that bond in place before your program launches service. Right now, the CPUC is looking at revisions to that CCA bond requirement, which could frankly increase the amount of bond posting that's required by CCAs. We are all involved in this discussion, making sure that the requirements that occur are not overly onerous on CCAs, and but we'll keep you posted. Essentially, what we're looking to do is probably match what energy service providers, other ESP providers in the state have to do, so that it's done on a fair basis. But nothing specific to report on that other than it's underway and opening testimonies happening at the end of this month. Probably that will be a matter that will not come to fruition or be decided until the beginning of 2018. Next is PG&E's general rate case, Phase 2. The only thing to really know here is that there are some proposed CCA fee reductions, fees that were typically charged by the utilities to the CCAs, and this is an advantageous filing for us, and we'll keep you posted. Let's see what the timing is on that. Nothing new to report. Ongoing settlement talks with the hope of introducing a proposed reduction in certain fees sooner than January 2018. So that is something that we'll be reporting out on the next few months. The last thing I'll say for today is that the time of use residential rulemaking is underway at the Commission. On June 28th, a draft resolution was issued regarding that. So if you're really into the nitty-gritties and details on this stuff, you can go online and find that. Right now, Marine Clean Energy and Sonoma Clean Power are the only two CCAs that are tapped to participate in the pilot program. So this is nothing that's going to affect MBCP immediately. However, they are looking at implementing time of use rate structures by year end with implementation in 2019. So again, this will be part of the work that Pacific Energy does and that Tom will be helping with in terms of rate design and how that might shift with time of use adoption in 2019. So that'll conclude my regulatory part of this. Are there any questions on any of that? Yes, sir.
Termini.
What do you know about SB 356 regarding what PG&E says is the release of proprietary information? They're opposing it. Any information on that at all?
I don't know anything about SB 356, but we can get back to you on that. Excuse me?
Organizations to back them up. It's SB 356. Maybe you could check on that.
I sure will.
Let us know why PG&E is so against it, why we should be suspicious.
Well, they're trying to protect their data if that's, yeah. So we'll get back to you guys on that, send an email out.
Maybe they can
Councilman
bundle it with voter data. Through the chair, question on, thank you very much, Shannon, the Cal CCA news article here. Glad to see our new employee is front and center in the photograph, so Tom was there at a recent meeting. So this association, obviously, this JPA is going to be a member too.
You are a member.
We are a member. Should each individual city and county also be a member of this association to strengthen the opportunity that CCA, Cal CCA would have?
You know, I don't think they would, I don't think they'd turn you down. That's certainly a possibility. They do have an affiliate member category, which MBCP currently is. Until you become operational, then you'll be a full member, a full voting member. And so if a city or county wanted to plug in that fashion, that would be the category, and the fee is $1,500 per year.
Okay, and I see Ted is in the corner, so I'll ask you to talk to the city manager about it. Maybe we can help strengthen that by each of the cities and counties becoming members or associate members.
Sure.
Thank you.
That sounds good. Okay, so now other questions on regulatory, because I'll do a quick rundown on legislative before we wrap up today. Okay, let's go to legislative. Thank you. So there are currently a number of bills that Cal CCA is tracking and engaged on through their lobbying effort in Sacramento. There's upwards of 20 plus right now that are being tracked. However, there are 4 that are deemed priority bills through Cal CCA that Lean and other organizations have been involved in as well. So we'll start off with SB 618. There was a question about that one earlier. That one was considered a very problematic for CCAs because there was language originally in that bill that said that the integrated resource plan, which I just referred to, had to be approved by the California Public Utilities Commission. CCAs pushed back on that, saying, no, one of the hallmarks of community choice is local autonomy over decision-making and procurement decisions, and retaining that autonomy is super important. So the language was amended, which moved the CCA community from opposed to now neutral, saying, so the language now says that the IRP must be certified. So it's a little more in the category of implementation plans that doesn't have to be approved. So that one is now we're in neutral, and there hasn't been a lot of action on that of late. AB 920 is a bill that deals with the California Renewable Portfolio Standard, and it deals with baseload energy requirements. And it essentially is asking the CPUC to provide oversight through the integrated resource plan discussion. You can see that these IRPs are going to be important to ensure diverse energy mixes and a well-balanced portfolio. So philosophically, this is probably not a bad thing. The devil is always in the detail in the implementation of these things. And so CCA's issue here is similar to 618, which is that all sounds fine. However, we do not want to be told or in any way have our local control amended or disturbed by 920. There are also some other issues related to the calculation of those baseload energy requirements and all that. So right now, Cal CCA remains oppose unless amend on that bill. SB 79, as of this morning, the opposed position has been moved to neutral. So this bill deals with GHG reporting requirements specifically for power, that unspecified power that is either in-state or out of state. And so language was amended to change the implementation date of this particular bill to coincide with RPS reporting, so just to make it a little more streamlined. And there was some amended language regarding how out-of-state unspecified sources would be counted and the hourly reporting requirements. It's all very detailed and nuanced, but the CCA language was adopted, and so we moved from opposed to neutral on that particular bill, which is great news. The last I'll say is a flagship bill, SB 100, which is Kevin De Leon's bill, which is truly aspirational. It's essentially seeking to move the California Renewable Portfolio Standard to 100% by 2045, and to increase the existing requirements to 60% by 2030. Right now, through SB 350, they're at 50% by 2030. So somebody mentioned a concern about supply availability. These kinds of statewide policies definitely send a market signal to develop more renewable power, and that the state of California is going to continue to be in the lead. And so far, CCA programs have exceeded the California RPS requirements, and we do expect that they will continue to be in the lead in achieving those goals. So Cal CCA is supportive in concept. There's some devils in the details on that one, that they're staying in close contact with the author's office to make sure that nothing changes in that bill that would make it difficult for us to achieve those benchmarks. So I'll stop there. Thank you for listening, because I know it can be a little Byzantine. Yes, sir.
This also has to do with PG&E, more rapidly than we imagined, going over to non-greenhouse gas, supplies. As they reach 60 to 100%, does that render organizations like ourselves irrelevant?
That's an opinion.
That's what I was
would you
asking
like
for.
me to opine on that? I would say
Sure,
no,
please.
because there are a couple of other value propositions of CCAs, including the advent of competition, which ultimately drives prices down, as we are seeing. I also think that CCAs have accelerated, in many ways, the adoption of carbon-free and increased renewable policies,
So we're inspirational.
I would say.
Very good. I
And the
like that.
third value proposition that we're seeing is that CCAs have really become local innovators and economic development drivers. So that's one metric, and that's a very important metric, but there are other values.
Any other questions from board members? Any questions from the public? Okay, you have a question? Please go to the mic.
Had a clarification question. So the PG&E going to 60%, that included nuclear though, didn't it? So their 60%, I don't think is the same as our 60% in terms of sustainable energy.
You mean in terms of carbon-free content?
Yeah, I
Yes,
think
it does include nuclear.
They include nuclear, so
Yes.
that really makes theirs only 30% really of renewable, sustainable energy, right? I mean, so we're still way higher.
Okay, any other questions from the public? Okay, that is the last item on our agenda, and before we officially adjourned, I'd like to make sure you hand in those oath of offices for those two or three that had those. The next meeting of the Operations Board is scheduled for August 2nd at 9 a.m. in Watsonville, where it will be. And August 16th, 9 a.m., Policy Board here, probably.
Yes, assuming it's still available.
Assuming it's, okay. But we'll surely be in touch with you. So that concludes today's session. Thank you for being here. We're moving onward and upward. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.